Perhaps you're not bad with money because of a lack of intelligence. Perhaps you're bad with money precisely because your mind is too good at creating explanations to remain stagnant. You think quickly, see patterns that others don't, and perceive contradictions before everyone else. But your bank account doesn't reflect any of that. And the question no one asks is, what if the problem isn't a lack of intelligence, but an excess of thinking without action? Stick around until the end, because this video is going to touch on something that most finance channels will never have the courage to say. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel now. The Money Exposed exists to talk about what the financial system doesn't want you to understand. Turn on notifications. And tell me in the comments, which state or city in the United States are you watching this from right now? I want to know where this content is reaching. There's a silent belief that many people hold, that intelligence should automatically generate money, that if you think well, analyze well, and learn quickly, then naturally you should be in a better financial situation. But look what happens in practice. There are people who understand politics, technology, human behavior, history, philosophy, science. People who read, who research, who question everything. And these same people are in debt, stuck on minimum wage, without savings, without investment, without a clear way out. This is no coincidence, and it's not due to a lack of effort. The problem lies deeper. There's a huge difference between analytical intelligence, which solves complex problems, and financial intelligence, which is the ability to make practical and simple decisions with money consistently. A person can have a very high IQ and still not know how to deal with bills, debt, impulse buying, emergency savings, or a plan to escape poverty. Because these things don't require analytical intelligence. They require emotional discipline, habit, and consistency. And these three elements don't come from IQ, they come from repeated behavior. The first problem is that the intelligent mind transforms money into a problem that is too complex to solve. The intelligent person wants the perfect strategy, the perfect investment, the perfect timing, the plan without any flaws. And while they're putting together this plan in their head, the basics don't happen. They don't track expenses. They don't cut what slowly bleeds them every month. They don't create a minimum reserve. They don't avoid debt that will cost twice as much in a year. Complexity becomes an excuse for not starting with the simple things. And the confrontation here is straightforward. You don't need a thesis on economics to stop spending money that hasn't even arrived yet. The basics work. The basics have always worked. But the mind that likes sophistication resists the basics because the basics seem too small. And so the money continues to leak out while the person researches the ideal strategy. The second problem is that intelligent people confuse understanding with changing. This is perhaps the most painful point of this video. Because if you're here, you probably consume a lot of content. You read, you research, you compare information, you have deep conversations about money, about the system, about inequality, about behavior. And the feeling is that you're evolving because you're learning something new. But the bank account remains the same. The behavior remains the same. The result remains the same. Knowledge that doesn't change behavior becomes entertainment for anxious people. And that's not judgment. It's a real psychological pattern. The brain releases dopamine when it learns something new. So learning about money can give the same feeling of pleasure as dealing with money, without the real discomfort of change. The person leaves the video feeling productive, but without having done anything different. The question you need to answer honestly is, in the last 6 months, what have you learned about money that has translated into real action in your life? The third problem is procrastination, precisely in the area that could set you free. Intelligent people see risks before everyone else, and this, which should be an advantage, becomes a trap. Before starting anything involving money, the mind already lists everything that could go wrong. What if I lose? What if I fail? What if I discover I'm not as capable as I thought? What if people realize I was wrong? This paralyzes everything. It paralyzes the idea of extra income. It paralyzes career changes. It paralyzes the business that's been on paper for years. It paralyzes the investment that seemed too risky. It even paralyzes financial organization because opening your bank statement and seeing the reality hurts. Sometimes you call this analysis, but it's fear dressed up as intelligence. And time passes, and the financial situation remains the same, and the person remains intelligent, continues to analyze, and remains trapped. If this video resonates with you, leave a comment now with the number that represents you. 1. If you overthink before acting. 2. If you spend money due to anxiety. 3. If you procrastinate on what matters. And if you're finding this content helpful, please like it. This helps the channel continue reaching those who need it. The fourth problem is that intelligent people hate losing so much that they stop playing. There's a concept in psychology called loss aversion. The pain of losing something is almost twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining something equivalent. And for those who grew up in scarcity, for those who saw their parents struggle, for those who have already been left with nothing, this fear of losing the little they have is even more intense. Intelligent people can imagine in detail all possible ways to fail. So they don't invest because they might lose. They don't negotiate salaries because they might seem arrogant. They don't try the business because it might not work. They don't put themselves out there because they might be judged. They don't ask for help because they might seem incompetent. And the financial result of this paralysis is devastating. Those who are afraid of losing anything end up wasting time. And time is the only asset that never comes back. The fifth problem is the ego rejecting the basics. Some intelligent people want sophisticated solutions to simple problems. They don't want to hear about budgeting. They don't want to hear about cutting small expenses. They don't want to hear about emergency savings, because these things seem too trivial for someone who considers themselves above average. But financial freedom doesn't come from a brilliant strategy. It comes from repetitive and even tedious actions. Writing down expenses every day is tedious. Saving money every month is tedious. Avoiding impulse buying is tedious. But that's what works. Your brain may like complex ideas, but your financial freedom comes from simple actions done consistently over a long period. The sixth problem is using money to numb a life you don't like. This is one of the most silent and destructive patterns. The person arrives home exhausted from a job they hate. They feel the pressure of a life they didn't choose. They carry the burden of comparing themselves to others. They feel the anger of a system that seems designed to keep them trapped. And they buy something. Not because you need it, but because that moment of buying provides immediate relief. It's instant dopamine. It's the feeling that at least in that moment, you have control over something. Then comes the guilt. Then comes the promise to change. Then comes another expense. You're not buying things. Often, you're trying to buy silence within your own mind. And this cycle can last for years without the person realizing what's really happening. The seventh problem is confusing being different with being doomed. Many intelligent people feel out of place, outside of mainstream conversations, outside of work that doesn't make sense, outside of a life that seems made for others. And this feeling is real. It's not an exaggeration. But there comes a point where this identity of being different, of not fitting in, starts to function as an excuse not to develop practical skills, not to learn how to sell, not to negotiate, not to do what needs to be done to change the financial situation. Being misunderstood might explain your pain, but it can't become the identity that justifies your stagnation, because no system will automatically recognize your intelligence and pay you for it. You need to transform what you know into something the world values and pays for. Now comes the turning point. Nothing said here means that intelligent people are condemned to be poor. Quite the contrary. The point is that intelligence without direction becomes an elegant prison, a comfortable prison, full of good explanations, but a prison nonetheless. The solution isn't to become smarter. The solution is to create simple systems. A rule to control spending, a rule to save money before spending, a rule for emotional purchases, a rule to act before researching further, a rule to turn skills into income, a rule to protect your time and energy. Simple systems repeated over a long period can change your financial life. Intelligence alone cannot. And here is the central rule of this video. It's called the rule of applied intelligence. For every hour you spend thinking about money, you need concrete action to improve your financial life. 1 hour of analysis, 1 real action. It could be canceling an expense you don't use. It could be writing down your monthly expenses. It could be creating a minimum reserve of $50. It could be selling something unused in your house. It could be studying a skill that someone else pays for. It could be asking for a raise. It could be organizing your debts into a simple list. It could be spending 24 hours before making any impulse purchase. Simple, real, repeated. That's the difference between those who think about money and those who build money. Perhaps you've spent years trying to prove to the world or to yourself that you're intelligent. But financial life doesn't reward those who seem intelligent. It rewards those who can transform thought into action. Your IQ can help you see patterns that others don't, but only repeated actions will get you out of where you are. And if you're here, you've already taken the first step. Now it's time to turn what you saw in this video into action today. Leave a like if this video made sense to you, and comment below, what's your biggest problem with money? Overthinking, spending due to anxiety, procrastination, or fear of starting? Always read the comments. I want to know where you are on this journey. And now, the video that appears on the screen was made precisely for the next step you need to take. Don't skip it. This is the content that continues this conversation. The Money Exposed. Until next time.